All right, so this video is reviewing trigonometry. We did circles and trig in the same unit, but this is just going to review the trig portion of it. So first question there is convert 390 degrees to radians. So let's go over how to do that. When we are converting to radians, we take our degrees, which is 390, and we times by pi over 180. So to convert to radians, we times by pi over 180. Remember that when we simplify this, we only type in 390 over 180. We don't type the pi in the calculator because pi is going to be in our final answer. So when we go to, you can just type it in Desmos, we would just do 390 divided by 180. Also remember that it gives me a decimal, but if I click this button here that has the fraction, it converts that decimal to a fraction, which is what I need, 13 over 6. So if I go back, then my final answer would be 13 over 6 times pi, and the pi is usually written on the top, 13 pi divided by 6. When you guys are typing this in the box, you can type 13 pi, pi, over 6 if you don't know how to get the symbol up. That's fine too. Okay. All right, now we're converting from radians to degrees. When we do that, we now multiply by 180 on top and pi on bottom. Okay, 180 on top and pi on bottom. What happens are these pi's will cancel, right? Pi divided by pi goes away. So we're really just doing 2/3 times 180. So that's all you're typing in. 2 divided by 3 times 180. You can type it in Desmos or you could type it in your phone calculator and you get 120 back. So 2 pi over 3 radians is the same as 120 degrees. All right, next we're looking at a graph. It says determine the amplitude, period, and midline of this graph. So let's first remember that midline is going to be the number that's in the middle of the max and the min. So if I look at this graph, this is all looking at the y's, looking at vertical. The maximum of this graph, the highest it goes is 3, right? The graph never goes above 3. And the lowest it goes, the minimum, it hits it a few times, but the minimum is at -3. So the midline is found as the number in the middle, which in this case is 0. It's halfway between 3 and -3. Now, it's not just 0, midline is a line. It's actually talking about if you were to draw a horizontal line, like straight through. So the midline is always y equals, and then the number in the middle, which is 0 for this one. Okay. And then we can find the amplitude by saying, well, how far is the middle from the max? That's the amplitude. So the maximum's 3, the middle is 0, 3 max minus middle, right? Max minus middle will give me the amplitude. Okay. Period was the hardest one. I'm gonna erase what I just wrote about the max minus middle. So if you wanted to write that down anywhere, go ahead and do that. Period is the horizontal distance until the graph starts to repeat itself. We always started by wherever the graph crosses the y-axis. So this one, it starts at the middle of the graph. It goes up all the way back to the middle, down all the way back to the middle, if I were to keep going, it would just repeat itself. Look, if I were to keep going, it would repeat that same pattern. And then if I were to do another repeat, then it would repeat that same pattern again. Each of these different colors is representing a period. Okay, there are 4 periods there that I've traced. So period is how long horizontally until it starts to repeat. So if I just go back and look at that first period again, after we hit where we were going to start to repeat, the number on the x-axis is our answer. That is our period. So the period is pi for this one. Okay. Next one is still asking for amplitude period. It says vertical shift, which is the same thing as midline. You just don't have to write the y equals. Okay, midline, vertical shift, very similar. You just don't need the y equals. All right, from the equation, amplitude and vertical shift are easy from the equation. Amplitude is the number in the front. Remember, amplitude is always positive. Okay, the negative there is just a reflection on the graph. We did some transformations with this when we learned it. So you do not include the negative as part of your amplitude. Your amplitude is always positive. So 2 is the amplitude. It's just the number in the front. And vertical shift is always the last number. Whatever the sign is, you take it with this one. So this is +1. So vertical shift is +1. Period was the hardest one. To find the period, we did 360 because there's 360 degrees in one period of the parent graph of sine or cosine. And we divided it by the number in front of x. The number in front of x, which is 3. So 360 divided by 3 is 120 degrees. So that's how we found our period. Sometimes they'll ask you to convert that to radians, which we learned how to do in the first problem. So you could convert that to radians if you needed to. All right, and then last couple here are dealing with the unit circle, which is still trigonometry. So this one says, in the accompanying diagram of a unit circle, the ordered pair x, y represents the point where the terminal side of theta intersects the circle. And they drew it out. Here's theta right there. And then it's talking about this point, x, y, where that angle intersects the circle. If theta is 150 degrees, so they're telling me that, what is the value of x? Okay, and we talked about for these problems, whenever it starts talking about the unit circle and finding x and y coordinates, that to find x, we always do cosine of the angle. And to find y, we would always do sine of the angle. So they only asked us to find x. So what we're going to do is just do cosine of the angle, cosine of 150, and it should give us one of these back. It may not give us the exact one back, but it will give us the decimal that goes along with one of these. And again, I'm doing cosine because they asked for x. So I'm going to go to Desmos. And you need to first check and make sure you're in degrees. So if you click on the little wrench up at the top right, it's above the plus and minus, and look all the way down, it says radians and degrees. And you want to make sure degrees is in green, degrees is highlighted. So it's really important or you're going to get the question wrong. And I know I want to do degrees because they gave me an angle in degrees. They said 150. So I'm going to do cosine of 150. And they gave me this decimal, negative 0.866025, all that. So let's go back and look at our answer choices. So negative 0.86, that's not 1, right? And that's not negative 1/2, because I know that decimal. So then I need to type in B and D and figure out which one's the same decimal. So now I can go back to Desmos and type in negative √3/2. I'm going to leave cosine of 150 there so I don't have to memorize that decimal. And I'm just going to do negative square root 3/2. And look, that is the same decimal, so I know that's the answer. Okay, so I know B is the answer because it was the same decimal. So they could ask you a problem like this where you have to know that X is the cosine and Y is the sine of the angle. They could just be very straightforward like our last problem. And they could just say, find sine of 45 degrees. So you would go to Desmos, just like we did before, and you would type in sine of 45. You would want to make sure, again, that you're in degree mode, which it still is because I haven't changed it. And then like we did on the last problem, we're going to have to type our answer choices in to find out which one is the same decimal. All right, so it's not 1/2 because we know 1/2 is 0.5. We also just saw that √3/2 was like 0.86 something. So it's probably not that one since we just typed it in. So I'm going to start with B and then we'll go from there and we can try typing in D if that's not it. So square root 2/2. Square root 2/2. And that is the same decimal. So that would be my answer, square root 2/2. Right? That's it for the trig slides.